Hare Krishna. So we continue with the next chapter, chapter 9, detachment from all of this material. I will first read the chapter summary from Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. And he mentions 8 lessons to be learned from this chapter. In this chapter, the Avadhuta Brahman describes the lesson to be learned from the 7 remaining spiritual masters. Beginning with the Kurara bird, he also describes an additional goal, one's own body. The first lesson. The instruction of the Kurara bird is that attachment is the mother of all distress. One who is unattached and has no material possessions is qualified to achieve unlimited happiness. Second lesson. The Avadhuta Brahman learned from a foolish, lazy boy that by becoming free from anxiety, one can nicely worship the Supreme Lord and experience transcendental bliss. Third lesson to be learned. The instruction received from the young girl who kept only one conch shell bangle on each wrist is that one should remain alone and thus steady his mind. Only in such a condition will it be possible for one to fix his mind completely on the Supreme Lord. Once several men arrived to ask for the hand of a young girl whose relatives had coincidentally left the house. She went inside and began to prepare food for the unexpected guest by beating rice paddy. At that time, the conch shell bangles made a loud noise, rattling against each other. In order to stop this sound, the girl broke off the bangles one by one until at last only one remained on each arm. Just as 2 or more bangles make noise, if 2 or more people live together, there is no bound to be quarrel and useless gossiping. The fourth lesson, the Avadhuta Brahman also received instruction from the arrow maker, who was also absorbed in constructing an arrow, that he did not even notice that the king was passing right by him on the road in the same way. One should worship Shri Hari with undivided attention and a controlled mind. 5. The lesson to be learned from the serpent is that a sage should wander alone, should not live in any pre-arranged place, should be always careful and grave, should not reveal his movements, should take assistance from no one, and should speak little. 6. This is a lesson to be learned from the spider. Just as the spider makes its web from its own saliva and then redraws it, the Supreme Personality of Godhead creates this universe from out of himself and then winds it up into his own body. 7. From the weak insect that assumed the form of a wasp, the Avadhuta Brahman learned that the living entity under the sway of affection, hatred, and fear attains in his next life the identity of that object upon which he had fixed his attention. 8. Realizing that the temporary material body is subject to birth and death, and that this human form of body is extremely rarely achieved, a sober person should give up his attachment for the body and should probably utilize his time for acquiring knowledge so that he can attain the goal of life. So these are the summary of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. So now we will read the first verse. The saintly Brahman said, everyone considers certain things within the material world to be most dear to him, and because of attachment to such things, one eventually becomes miserable. One who understands this gives up material possessiveness and attachment and thus achieves unlimited happiness. I'll read the purport of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. As a result of forgetfulness of the Supreme Lord, the conditioned soul's taste for objects produced by the material modes of passion and ignorance increases unlimitedly. The conditioned souls rarely have the inclination to attain the platform of pure goodness from which one can realize the Supreme Lord. All material miseries are produced from the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance. The momentary lack of distress experienced due to the influence of the modes of goodness is not the same as genuine spiritual happiness. Unalloyed devotees do not notice the presence of temporary distress produced by the interaction of the modes, material modes, because they experience unlimited happiness due to being situated on the platform of pure goodness. Conditioned souls were under the control of their senses run after limited, ever-exchanged and tempting material objects, and thus they become beggars to achieve their objectives. This is the cause of their distress. So that's the introduction to the next guru, the Kurara bird, which is mentioned in text 2. Once a group of large hawks who were unable to find any prey attacked another, a weaker hawk, who was holding some meat. At that time, being in danger of his life, the hawk gave up his meat and experienced actual happiness. The hawks, they are flying very high in the sky, and they have very sharp eyes, and yes, he could So he could see that the other hawk was holding. So he was flying very high in the sky, and he saw some meat. But another hawk saw also the meat. And then when he was flying towards it, he saw the other hawk also coming, and he knew, oh, I will have to fight for it. That I will have to risk my life for it. And then the hawk gave up the meat, and by that he experienced happiness. He didn't want to fight, and he gave it up. The purport. Incited by the modes of nature, birds become violent and kill other birds to eat them or steal meat captured by them. Hawks, vultures, and eagles are in this category. However, one should give up the envious propensity to commit violence against others and should take to Krishna consciousness, whereas one sees every living entity as equal to oneself. On this platform of actual happiness, one does not envy anyone and thus sees no one as his enemy. So the Kurara was holding some meat, Vishwanath says that. So the next verse. In family life, the parents are always in anxiety about their home, children, and reputation. But I have nothing to do with these things. I do not worry at all about any family, and I do not care about honor and dishonor. I enjoy only the life of the soul, and I find love on the spiritual platform. Thus I wander on the earth like a child. It's compared like a child. A child has no worries. So when one has no interest in accumulating worldly praise of criticism, he become fixed in the signs of the self, Bhaktivedanta Saraswati mindset. So this is what he learned from a child, to be without worries. That so no worries about the material body and all these interactions in this world, enjoying the life of the soul, going that. Text 4. In this world, two types of people are free from all anxiety and merged in great happiness. So these two are mentioned here. One who is retarded and childish fool, and one who has approached the Supreme Lord, who is beyond the three modes of material nature. So this is purport. Can someone read the purport of text 4?
Can I, Maharaj?
Please.
Those who fervently seek material sense gratification are gradually pushed down into a miserable condition of life. Because as soon as one even slightly violates the laws of nature, one must suffer sinful reaction. Thus, even materially alert and ambitious persons are constantly in anxiety, and from time to time they are plunged into great misery. Those who are non-sensual and retarded, however, live in a fool's paradise, and those who have surrendered to Lord Krishna are filled with transcendental bliss. Therefore, both a fool and a devotee may be said to be peaceful, in the sense that they are free from ordinary anxiety of the materially ambitious person. However, this does not mean that the devotee and retarded fool are on the same platform. The fool pleases that of a dead stone, whereas a devotee's satisfaction is based on perfect knowledge.
So, yes, they are not on the same platform. So in text 1, in text 2, we have heard about this hawk. What is the mentality described here by the hawk? That can someone tell me this mentality of the hawk?
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Maharaj, from the weaker heart, we understand that it is much better to give up attachment, a piece of meat that it was holding, because holding on to such things can also cause loss of life. So it was intelligent, and therefore it let it go. So in the material world, for the lessons for us is that there are many things which can actually become very, very putting us or indulging us into activities which will make us become implicated. Hence, to give it up is much better an option.
Yeah, that's true. That because something is dear in this material world, we become implicated. But what makes something dear to you in the material world? What is it that makes us dear? Yes, Maharaj.
Maharaj, something that gives us shelter and hope, that becomes very dear to us.
Yeah, that's true, but how does it come about that in the purport we have heard this is under the influence of the mode of passion? Because of the mode of passion, we become attached, we want to enjoy. And because of attachment, we become miserable. And When one becomes miserable, then one gives up attachment and becomes happy. But of course, this is for the wise man or for the devotee. The materialistic man, it will be very difficult to learn this lesson. Although, even for materialistic men, at the end of their life, they become a little wise, a little. Because we have also heard about the Korari bird. Yeah, that will be discussed later. It's crying at night because of attachment of the husband. When one gives it up, one becomes happy. So the hawk gave up the meat and became happy. And then the Avadhuta Brahman speaks about living the life of the soul. That it describes two happy people, the ignorant soul, and one who approached the Supreme Lord. But they are not on the same level. The sadhu is in the spiritual world and the fool lives in the fool's paradise. The sadhu has attachment to Krishna in the spiritual world. That's the difference. That Raspo, you have any further comments?
No, Maharaj.
Okay, then we continue. We read this fool's paradise. And now we come from 5 to 10, the girl with the bangles will be described. That so a guest, the essence is that a guest comes, she's alone at home. She has to serve the guest, and she has conch shell bangles on her both arms, many, and she is husking rice. That, and because she's husking the rice, these are colliding and making noise. That but she's ashamed. She does not want the guest to know that she's husking rice. Means removing the husk from the rice. So that otherwise he will think they are poor people. They cannot buy flour for making chapatis. They have to husk it first. And therefore, she takes off all the bangles and leaves only one at each wrist. And by that, when she's husking the rice, there is no noise. So that's a story. But what lesson do we have to learn from it? We will first read from the Bhagavatam here, the story. Once a marriageable young girl was alone in her house because her parents and relatives had gone that day to another house. At that time, a few men arrived at the house, specifically desiring to marry her. She received them with all hospitality. The girl went to the private place and began to make preparations so that the unexpected guest could eat. As she was beating the rice, the conch shell bracelets on her arm were colliding and making a loud noise. The young girl feared that the man would consider her family to be poor because their daughter was busily engaged in the menial task of husking rice. Being very intelligent, the shy girl broke the shell bracelets from her arms, leaving just 2 on each wrist. Thereafter, as the young girl continued to husk the rice, the 2 bracelets on each wrist continued to collide and make new noise. Therefore, she took one bracelet took one bracelet off each arm, and with the only one left on each wrist, there was no more noise. O subduer of the enemy, I traveled throughout the surface of the earth, learning constantly about the nature of the world, and thus I personally witnessed the lesson of the young girl, that when many people live together in one place, there will undoubtedly be quarreling. And even if only two people live together, there will be frivolous conversation and disagreement. Therefore, to avoid conflict, one should live alone, as we learn from the example of the bracelet of the young girl. So, the lesson is many people will quarrel, even two people. Therefore, one should live alone. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur makes the point. The girl did fulfill the duty of a host. Sages live alone, because otherwise they talk and talk. Many of these instructions are on the jnani level, but they are helpful in bhakti. So that's on the jnani level. Many jnanis together will speak and quarrel. Vaishnavas come together to relish the sweet sound of the holy name. For the devotees, it is better to stay in association of devotees. There cannot be any quarrel among pure devotees, because there is no envy and there is respect. The soul is trying to serve. Although there may be disagreement, there is no false ego involved. There is unity in diversity. There would be no grudges. When false ego becomes involved, then there will be grudges. If we are not on that level, then we should be more humble. Association with devotees awards liberation. We have here the purport, but I will read the purport of Bhaktivedanta, Saraswati Maharaj, in this verse. The lesson to be learned from the girl who removed all her bangles, but one is that one who is trying to advance on the path of jnana yoga, which involves philosophical speculation, should live alone after giving up all desires for having the association of friends and relatives. After all, whenever people live together, they quarrel over insignificant matters and engage in much trivial talk that has no relation to their aspiration for spiritual advancement. Therefore, just to have a peaceful environment in which to practice yoga, it is recommended that one lives alone. On the other hand, a princess who has been married to a qualified prince dresses herself very attractively and then appears before him to receive his love. Similarly, Bhakti Devi decorates herself with the association of Vaishnavas who assemble to chant the holy name of the Lord and dance in ecstasy. Because pure devotees do not associate with non-devotees, in that sense, they reside alone and thus take the lesson of the single bangle from the young girl. After all, pure devotees do not quarrel among themselves, nor do they engage in frivolous talk, because they are fully satisfied on the platform of rendering devotional service to the Lord without any material desire. Thus, devotees of the Lord happily associate with one another for the purpose of rendering service to the Lord. The Supreme Lord personally said in Srimad Bhagavatam 3:25-34, a pure devotee who is attached to the activities of devotional service and will always engage in the service of my lotus feet never desires to become one with me. Such a devotee who is unflinching engaged always glorifies my pastimes and activities. If there is more than one person in one place, there is possibility that there will be quarrel, but each individual has his own idea and purpose. When the girl took away all her bangles except one on each wrist, there was no more noise as a result of colliding with each other. Similarly, one should give up the association of those who are not devoted to the Supreme Lord. The character of a Vaishnava is always pure. However, in places where non-devotees congregate, there will undoubtedly be envious criticism of Vaishnavas. That if many people are gathered to glorify the Lord, then there will be no conflict of interest. This is why one should worship the Lord in the association of like-minded people. This is also solitary bhajan as described in the system of Ekayan. So worship of the Lord in association of like-minded people is solitary bhajan. Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj. Of course, when I was reading it, that's one should worship the Lord in association of devotees. If the devotees to come together, they glorify the Lord. But sometimes neophyte devotees, they want to talk about other things. And then it becomes more difficult. So we have to try to associate with the most advanced devotees who are always absorbed in the service of the Lord and think about and speak about the Lord's mission in their service to the Lord, always related to Krishna. That not that we speak about world politics and all these things, that will not help us. So, in other words, to apply this, there are it's not easy always. So, what is your experience with that? Can we just follow this? that this association of devotees always about Krishna. The pure devotees for sure. But mostly we are all on the path of becoming pure. Anartha nivritti. It's a long process before. It can take 30, 40, 50 years, more than a lifetime even. Yes. So what do we do? Solitary or an association of devotees? Or tolerate the situation? Any comments? Or I'm the only one who has that problem?
But solitary is more problem than association of devotees is a problem.
That's good. A good point. Good point. That it is said it's better to live, to embrace a tiger than to live in association with non-devotees. So yes, we have to tolerate. That's also my experience. To associate with devotees, you have to be tolerant. So, but it's our only chance for advancement in devotional service, our association with devotees. But yeah, it is said at one side, these are the instructions for the jnanis. But we on the bhakti path can also take advantage on this. I've seen in our movement, fortunately or fortunately, I've been secretary for the GBC for 8 years, secretary for the global GBC, and secretary for the GBC executive committee. everything that went wrong to this movement went to my computer in my head. And that's a lot. It's interesting that, but yes, that so many difficulties. And it was not always about pure Krishna consciousness, these quarrels, mostly not. That, but yeah, that, but still, our movement is the only way really to make spiritual advancement. That we have to tolerate. Of course, we can seek the association of those who are more advanced. That's our right, I would say. That, so it's a challenging concept for all of us. Be sure we have Krishna conscious association. That because alone Maya will get you. That's the problem. That's what Bhakti Charamaj told us always. That when you have one stick, easy to break, but when you have many sticks together, difficult to break. Difficult to break. That's in association of devotees, Maya cannot do much. That as long as we are focusing on Krishna's service, Krishna's mission. Good. That was the girl with her bangles. No. Text. This was text 10, 11. We read it, most of it. 11. Having perfected the yoga sitting postures and conquering the breathing process, one should make the mind steady by detachment and the regulated practice of yoga. Thus one should carefully fix his mind on the single goal of yoga practice. So that reminds us of chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita. Yoga in a lonely place, living alone. Make the mind steady by detachment, by the practice of yoga. Fix the mind on a single goal. That. So the purport that so one should develop vairagya or detachment by observing that all material things are doomed. That's an interesting point. That thus one should take to the regulated practice of yoga, which is in this age the process of chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. According to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Avadhuta Brahman is recommending Bhakti Mishra Astanga Yoga. Bhakti Mishra Astanga Yoga. Or the Eightfold Mystic Yoga process performed as an offering to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is what Avadhuta Brahman is recommending. That Bhakti Mishra means it's a mixture with the Astanga Yoga process. That so the desire to enjoy the material world is so strong that the mind wanders here and there uncontrollably. Therefore it is stated, Driya Manam, the mind must be fixed in the goal of life, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the perfect stage of mental concentration called samadha, there is no longer any distinction between eternal and external vision, since one can see the absolute truth everywhere. In the mystic process, one must sit properly, and then it is possible to control the airs within the body. sit properly. Yeah. When the breathing process is controlled, the mind, which is dependent upon the actions of the body airs, is easily fixed in higher consciousness. But although the mind may be momentarily controlled, if one is overcome by the desire for sense gratification, the mind will again be lost. Thus, this verse emphasizes vairagya, detachment from material illusion. This is attained by abhyas yoga, the regulated practice of bhakti of Krishna consciousness, which is the highest yoga system, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita. And there 647 is quote, Yoginam api sarvan sammadhanantratmana shadvambasteyamam same yuktatamam mata. And of all yogis, he will always abides in me with great faith, worshipping me in transcendental loving service, is the most intimately united with me, and is the highest of all. Text 12. The mind can be controlled when it is fixed on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Having achieved a stable situation, the mind becomes free from polluted desires to execute material activities. Thus, as the mode of goodness increases in strength, one can completely give up the modes of passion and ignorance, and Chaldi, one transcends even the material mode of goodness. When the mind is freed from the fuel of the material modes of nature, the fire of material existence is extinguished. And one achieves the transcendental platform of direct relationship with the object of meditation, the Supreme Lord. That I will read Vishwanath Thakur's quote here. When the mind attains its goals, it gives up the desire for action, destroying rajas and tamas by increase of sattva. One attains a condition devoid of extraneous actions of the mind, being freed of the agitation of the sloth, and attains supreme bliss because of disappearance of even sattva. It is without fuel, since it is devoid of the gunas and their effects. Without fuel, that yes, it becomes extinguished by the material existence becomes extinguished because the fuel of the modes of nature runs out. That yes, so the mind becomes free from the polluted desires to execute material. That is the fuel of the material nature. It's gone. That now, thus Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Maharaj also comments on this verse. The three modes of material nature create conflict among one another. For that reason, those who are actually intelligent carefully control their mind. When one is freed from the influence of the modes of passion and ignorance, one achieves a life of auspiciousness. It is only possible to transcend the three modes of material nature when the mind is fully under control. When the mind is fully under control. Only possible to transcend the modes when the mind is completely under control. So what do you think of that? Is that encouraging or discouraging? That you can only transcend the modes when the mind is completely under control? So why is that? Okay. Why? Yes, please.
It sounds difficult because the mind is always here and there.
Yeah. That's difficult to get the mind completely under control. Right? Why it's difficult? Because the mind is influenced by the mode of passion and ignorance. So how can we control the mind? When the mind is uncontrolled, we cannot focus on Krishna. That's a problem. And if the mind is not situated in transcendence, it will be situated in material thoughts. Then we are not transcending. We are in the world of matter. But actually, it's a simple point. The point we are trying to achieve is spontaneous attraction to Krishna. If the mind is uncontrolled and wandering all over the universe, we will not be able to come to the point of transcendence. Therefore, Scripture says, Sarva vida nishedasya etereva kinkara. Trying to always remember Krishna and never forget him. This is, all the rules we follow are to facilitate our thinking of Krishna. That as servant, to think of Krishna and to think ourselves as servants of Krishna. We don't want to be that the mind is addicted to the material energy and play with the material energy. Bhunkte pragatijan gunam. That's Bhagavad Gita. Because we will not be able to fix our mind on Krishna. We will not be able to transcend. Then we remain always in the realm of matter. Taking action for serving Krishna comes from, where does it come from? Chanting, hearing, association with devotees. It comes back to the same point. But, and then lesson 13. 13 is the arrow maker. Arrow maker. There's a fourth lesson to be learned here. The lesson of the arrow maker. And that's a very practical lesson. Thus, when one's consciousness is completely fixed on the absolute truth, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one no longer sees duality or internal and external reality. The example is given of the arrow maker who was absorbed in making a straight arrow that he did not even see or notice the king himself who was passing right next to him. So this is the essential point of all these teaching. And this is a very powerful point made. That we are meant to focus our consciousness and our mind on Krishna. This ultimately to complete spontaneous love for Krishna. And the purpose of all rules and regulations is to bring us to the platform of pure devotion and service. We have here the arrow maker. The example of the arrow maker who was very focused on his task of making the arrow straight. He did not notice the king passing. He was completely focused on his task. So the arrow maker had the desire to make the arrow straight. Because of his desire, he was not distracted. So you made an arrow must be very straight, otherwise it will not hit his target. And that, so he was very absorbed and he did not see anything else that so this was first. There is a commentary here about Bhaktivedanta Saraswati. That the only way to withdraw the mind from the object of the senses is to eagerly engage in devotion and service of the Lord. When the mind is not absorbed in fervently desiring to please the Supreme Lord, it wanders on the subtle platform of accepting and rejecting the things of this world. By surrendering unto the Supreme Lord and engaging in his devotion and service, one can be freed from the continuous struggle for supremacy of the three modes of material nature. For one who is thus fully engaged in the spirit of enjoying things in a mood of being separate from Krishna, will not affect him as long as the conditioned soul wanders within the kingdom of mental speculation. Having given up Krishna's service, he will remain fully absorbed in matter. In this regard, one should carefully consider the following verse of Upadeshamrita. And there you have nectar of instruction. Second verse, I think. Atyara Payashya Prajalpa Yamagam Shana Sanga Saloliam Sabak Sadbih Bhakti Afinashati. One devotional service is spoiled when it becomes entangled in the following 6 activities: eating more than necessary, over and everything for mundane things, talking unnecessarily about mundane subject matters, practicing the scriptural rules and regulations only for the sake of following them and not for the sake of spiritual advancement, or rejecting the rules and regulations of scripture and working independently or whimsically, associating with worldly-minded persons who are not interested in Krishna consciousness, being greedy for mundane achievements. Yeah, this goes back to the verse in Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, when the mind, is absorbed on material sense gratification, it cannot be focused. That is this verse, Prashaktam, that in the 2nd chapter of the Gita, that in the Gita, Bhogasvara Prashaktanam Tayaparitasyeta Samaramano. Bhogasvara Prashaktanam, if the mind is attached to sense enjoyment, Tayaparitasyeta, it's completely disturbed. Then this one-pointed attention will not take place. Vyavsatmika Buddhi Ekanakonam. This one-pointed attention will not take place. Then the mind is disturbed. And it's what the point of Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Maharaj said, it's disturbed because one becomes entangled in the following 6 activities, these 6 activities mentioned by Rupa Goswami in Nectar of Devotion text 2. If one becomes entangled in it, then this one-pointed intelligence, this making this arrow of throwing this focus on Krishna will not be there. That I remember always my Guru Maharaj when we came in Navadvip in 1996 for the parikram. He said at the beginning that now we are arrived in the spiritual world. That was at the start of the Navadvip parikram. We have arrived in the spiritual world. Remain on the transcendental platform. Don't come down again to the material platform. Always be engaged in hearing the pastimes and chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Always chant or hear, and don't come down. So this absorption in Krishna consciousness becomes the focus. That we can have that focus also when we take darshan of the deities. We become so absorbed that we don't see anything else. We can become so absorbed in the chanting that we lose practically our consciousness of the environment. It's in the chanting or in reading or that. So that is this focus is very important. that when I was traveling with Prahladananda Maharaj, we went to many airports together. I was his assistant for some time. 10, 15 years we were traveling together, a few months a year. And in the airports, Maharaj, when we are at the boarding gate, he was just reading, absorbed in reading, and he did not see anything else. Nothing about the surroundings. So this focus is important. That but this is important to realize that this focus what is your experience with this focus? That easy to achieve, but what is described here in this verse? Sometimes we achieve, sometimes not. It's my experience. Sometimes the chanting is good, the focus on hearing is good, not always. But the strive is to attain this position of the arrow maker. That so text 14. A saintly person should remain alone and constantly travel without any fixed residence. Being alert, he should remain secluded and should act in such a way that he is not recognized or noticed by others. Moving without companions, he should not speak more than required. So, a sadhu wants to be attached to the Supreme Lord. He wants to become a Paratma Nishtam. He wants to depend on Krishna. We read here Vishvanatha his comment. He explained what he learned from the snake. The young girl is a guru for giving up the association of the yogis, of other yogis. The snake is the guru for giving up association of material people. So the sage moves about alone, afraid of society without a fixed residence, always alert. He lives only. He is unnoticed by the public, by his gait and actions. He has no companion and speaks little. So that's a good quality of the snake here. He's alone. We should be afraid of becoming involved in material thinking. That is the lesson to be learned. Because these verses are for the yogis, jnanis, but we have to abstract what's applicable to bhakti yoga. That is a good quality of a snake. He's alone. This is text 14. That also Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati has a comment on that. The propensity for material enjoyment is the cause of the living entity's distress. This propensity also covers his actual purpose in life. Instead of opposing the previous followed social etiquette, if one accepts it without attachment, then gradually he will achieve auspiciousness. When one follows the Varnashram system, it takes the first step in self-realization. One should work honestly and control his propensity for sexual enjoyment, either by completely renouncing it as a brahmachari or sannyasi, or by accepting the concession offered to the householders. Without regulating one's life, everything will be performed whimsically. So it will be impossible to make spiritual advancement. A person's attachment to society, friendship, and love is a great impediment on the path of spiritual elevation. If one maintains such attachment, progress will be very slow. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught us by his principal example that what the devotee should and should not do. It is simply disobedience to these principles, that will lead one to the perfection of life. There is no use in ways of mundane society which simply directs us towards the path of sense gratification. So, be afraid of becoming involved in material thinking. We read one verse more, verse 15. When a person living in a temporary material body tries to construct a happy home, the result is fruitless and miserable. The snake, however, enters a home that has been built by others and prospers happily. And someone read the purpose, please. The snake does not have.
The snake does not have the proclivity to build his own home, but rather lives in a suitable place constructed by other creatures. Thus, he does not entangle himself in the labor of home building. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur points out that although materialistic persons take unlimited pains to invent and mass produce electricity, automobiles, airplanes, etc., ultimately, these things are meant for the convenience of the Vaishnavas who are preaching Krishna consciousness. The karmis will always go to such trouble, and the devotees will always offer such laborious productions to the Supreme Personality of Godhead by engaging them in his loving service. The devotees, being concerned with the ultimate perfection of life, do not personally struggle for material advancement. On the other hand, there is no need for the devotees to artificially imitate the austere life style of ancient times. A devotee's goal is simply to serve Krishna as nicely as possible. Therefore, the devotees willingly accept beautiful mansions and all types of material opulences, not with any personal attachment, but only so that these things can be engaged in the loving service of the Lord. If one engages such things with a desire to enjoy them, one falls down from the platform of pure devotional service. Materialistic persons are only interested in exploiting their so-called yoga practice in order to rejuvenate their sexual potency or to vainly remember their previous conditioned lives, thus applying mysticism to the endless search for sense gratification. They do not understand the actual goal of human life.
Thank you. I hear the purport of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Maharaj, and I will read a few sentences of that purpose. Because Vaishnavas are travelers on the path of spiritual life, they do not carry the great burden of material advancement, because they abstract the essence of life. They do not undergo great inconvenience just for the comfort of their bodies, but instead live in a world built by others without becoming attached to it. Expertise in the act of renovation and preserving one's family or society tradition is not the goal of those who travel on the path of spiritual life. But Srila Prabhupada said utility is the principle. But for this we need purity. Purity is the force. Otherwise, we may up using things for ourselves instead of using it all for Krishna. So Krishna consciousness should be that it is for Krishna. The full focus should be on Krishna. So how to do that? That is the question. Full focus on Krishna. Thank you. We have gone halfway this chapter, which helps us to create more detachment from the material world. And tomorrow we will continue with the second half of the 9th chapter, and go into the 10th chapter. 10th chapter is the nature of fruitive activity. We will see in these chapters in Uddhava Gita that they have certain topics we are going through. And many of these topics are also found in the Dasamula of Bhaktivedanta Thakur. Because in this Dasamula speaks also about symptoms of conditioned souls, symptoms of liberated souls, and that's what we are going through now. The next chapters, if first fruitive activities that keeps us in this material world, and then the symptoms of conditioned souls, that we recognize them. And then the next chapter will be describe the symptoms of liberated souls. And then Krishna will explain how to go from the condition to the liberated platform. First come to the liberated platform, and then go beyond. And then Krishna will speak about Raja Bhakti again. That's the line that we are going through the chapters till the end of the section that I will be with you. Thank you. Looking forward to see you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Jai Prabhupada.
His Holiness Bhakti Prabhu Maharaj ki jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.